Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mangg, and welcome back to another Top 10. This time, I'm doing my Top 10 favorite action movies, and I decided to bring along a guest this time so he could share his list.
Yep, Mang's partner in crime, Ziggy here. I had some fun doing the Admit One series with you, where we discussed more things movie-related, so maybe check those out in case you like this video.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe a second perspective here can just give a bit more variety. So
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're going to be going back and forth from 10 to 1. There's probably going to be some crossovers on our list. I think we tend to like the same sort of stuff, so we have not looked at each other's lists, so we have no idea what's actually on it, except for perhaps my number one. I don't think that's a huge secret. But anyways, so let us get started with my number 10, which is The Raid. So this movie came out a little while ago, an Indonesian martial arts film that kind of just blew a lot of people away. Even you really enjoyed this, not even being a big martial artist kind of fan. It's just one of those kind of foreign martial arts flicks that kind of changes the game scene a little bit, like Ong Bak did, where there was just this kind of visceralness to it that we haven't really seen before. There is some gunplay to it, which if you're looking for just a pure martial arts movie, there is a bit more gun and shooting and things like that to it. But it is violent. It is fast paced. Very exciting movie.
it's a good one. I like that.
Yep.
My number 10 is The Mummy Returns.
Really?
Yes. Interesting facets about this is that I think this is a good representation of the action adventure, where it has a swashbuckling tone to it. It's not, you never know that the characters are in any serious peril, perhaps. I mean, there are undead creatures chasing after them, and there's some fantastic set pieces in this movie that really impressed me when I first saw it. Riding through London on a severed double-decker bus, shooting mummies in the face with a shotgun.
That's true.
Sequel to the first Mummy film.
The first one's really kind of more closer to a horror.
It is much. This one is just kind of almost like a Pirates of the Caribbean type feel to it. But I think it's kind of fun to get Brendan Fraser somewhere on this action list, and I think it's just. I wanted to fit it in there as a representation of the action-adventure and even a little bit family-friendly compared to some of these other ones.
That actually didn't even enter my mind because I really think of it more as just like an adventure movie than just a straight-up action movie. I guess it is. There is a lot of action in it. So.
Yes.
All right, then you're number 9. We're going to go back and forth like that.
And my number 9 is Expendables 2. I think for the Expendables series, the second one was the high watermark. They got a lot of guys in there. They got Chuck Norris in there, Bruce Willis, and Arnold actually have some considerable scenes in this one as opposed to the cameos of the first one.
It was pretty much Arnold's kind of comeback.
Yeah. Right. That spawned Last Stand and Sabotage and all those gems.
Whatever the prison one was.
Right. But yeah, I think Expendables 2 went a little bit further with just the sheer amount of actors and action sequences that the first one kind of got started with, and it didn't make the mistakes of the third one of scaling back the violence, the language, because the Expendables movies are really for the old school action fans who are not going to want to go to a PG-13 film for this kind of spectacle with these guys in the lineup. So
I would agree that the second one embodies the best parts of what Expendables is trying to represent.
Yeah, and so for how many of the ensemble cast make it in there, I think it makes my list at number 9, and a little bonus of Jean-Claude Van Damme as the villain. So
very memorable villain.
Yes, an enjoyable film.
Villain, I think.
Jean Villain or Villain.
Something like that.
There you go.
All right, my number 9 goes back to 1996, I want to say, and that is The Rock, directed by Michael Bay, starring Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery. I've lost count of how many times I've seen this movie. This is Nicolas Cage at his, I would probably say his best as far as like an actual serious movie, as far as
Yeah.
like a big budget kind of thing.
This is funny because in the same span of years, he was doing like Face Off and stuff like that in the mid '90s, where he was doing.
He was a contender as far as like an action kind of hero. But The Rock pairing him up with Sean Connery as him kind of a somewhat scientist nerd kind of character, although not really. And then Sean Connery basically as James Bond, as an old James Bond. And trying to take over Alcatraz from a bunch of terrorists, played by the leader, who's played by Ed Harris in one of his best roles as well. It's really just an unforgettable movie, and in my opinion, Michael Bay's best film he's ever done. All right, my number 8 then is Equilibrium. So this was a movie that's not talked about an incredible amount. Because I think it does get somewhat compared to The Matrix, even comparing itself to The Matrix.
On the box, it says better than The Matrix.
Yeah, which is a very bold claim.
Yep.
We'll see if The Matrix is on my list. But Equilibrium stars Christian Bale in a kind of dystopian European country where he plays a cleric, which is their term for kind of an enforcer. And in their dystopian world, feelings have been kind of outlawed. So everybody takes this drug which kind of suppresses emotions and feelings and things like that.
Yep.
And so he is their enforcer for, shutting down any sort of emotional content and art and music and things like that. But then his kind of position starts to break down as he begins to kind of feel, I guess. But the action scenes in Equilibrium rival anything else on this list. Just really... Even when we saw when I was we were 18, 19, something like that.
No, like 14, 15,
okay,
I think.
All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess it's been a while. Mm-hmm. We were at the appropriate age to see something like Equilibrium.
Yeah. No, I can watch it right now and still have an amazing time with it. So,
yeah. I mean, I like the theme, the setting, the dystopian world, and, yeah, it just kind of all comes together. Very entertaining, sci-fi-ish action movie.
Yeah. I'm glad you didn't talk about it in its entirety, because that is also my number 8, Equilibrium.
All right, there you go.
Mangg, he covered a lot of the reasons why I like it. It's nice to kind of have a cult classic film on your list, because, this is a movie with less exposure, certainly, compared to a lot of these.
We want to get those out there.
One thing I'll say is interesting about Equilibrium is I don't think you will ever see Christian Bale more badass in any movie than Equilibrium. I mean, that's
true.
This is Batman. This is Patrick Bateman. This is John Connor. Seeing him in Equilibrium is just a really fun experience.
I mean, you believe that he can take out a room of guys with absolute no issue.
Yeah. This movie has just a lot of big payoff scenes where you're just like, man, that was so cool. And just as you mentioned with this kind of spiritual art of gunfighting. Gun kata, as it's called. It really does, kind of bring in a lot of elements from other action movies. Like, there's a martial aspect to it, and it's a very unique viewing experience. So my number 8 as well, all Equilibrium.
Right. Good.
Moving on to my number 7 is Fast 7. Which I originally was going to jokingly say Fast 5 through 7, because they kind of all just meld together in my head.
Beautiful melding, yes.
Yeah. The really guilty pleasure about these Fast movies, especially starting with the 5th one, is you can just sense their willingness to discard inconveniences such as gravity and feasibility, the chance that they'll survive, these sort of things. They honestly want you to forget about all those and just show you the most ridiculous stunts in high-speed chases and more recently even action and fighting.
Action.
It's quite interesting how the Fast movies, and that you can really see this in 5 through 7, how they've really come along as terms of just being about pure spectacle as opposed to just, drag racing, which is kind of how it all started.
And I really think we can just thank Vin Diesel for all that. I mean, he really tries to go out and just make movies that he enjoys. Sometimes it pans out, sometimes it doesn't. But the Fast series recently has really become just a go-to for incredible spectacle.
Yep, it's a solid. You will be very satisfied, provided you just understand what you're going to, and you're just going to a roller coaster basically anytime you do these.
I mean, the series started out very much just about race culture and cars and things like that. But if you've been put off from the recent movies because it's just been about racing, it's really not.
No.
Like, they are pretty much like, they pull off just heists and things like that. And it's incredible. Yeah.
Yep. And one final note, they made some very smart additions to the cast beyond Vin Diesel in the recent ones.
They did.
In case you have no idea about these movies, The Rock has been in it for a while. They've snuck in Jason Statham.
Yep.
It does belong, I think, on this list from my perspective. So, Fast 7 is my 7. So.
All right, my number 7 is The Dark Knight.
Okay.
I mean, kind of like The Mummy Returns, I was kind of wishy-washy on, is this really an action movie? But there are a lot of sequences in the movie that are just kind of tense and fast-paced and things like that. Dark Knight is... I mean, I'm sure we'll do a top 10 superhero movies or comic book movies at some point. Dark Knight will probably be in the top 3. I've watched this at least 5 times as many times as I've seen Batman Begins. Many times more than Dark Knight Rises. I'm not a huge Batman fan, but the way that this movie comes together is just... even disregarding Batman Begins or the sequel, as just a standalone film, I think it just... Yeah, it just kind of works for me on a lot of levels. The Joker, Heath Ledger, really just brought it. But yeah, the gadgets and the vehicle sequences and the fighting, things like that. Yeah, it all works for me.
Yeah, and just one comment with The Dark Knight, you just really get the sense of Gotham, and like you're in this very brooding setting that is all just perfectly laid out before you in the tension and how dark the characters are a lot of the time.
I mean, Gotham in cinema has gone through a lot of kind of transitions from the Burton films and things like that, and even Batman Begins, Gotham seemed pretty different compared to Dark Knight. Dark Knight seemed very real, I think. Yeah. And so, it works for me. That there are potentially people out there like the Joker, and we don't exactly have people like Batman at the door. All right, my number 6 then is The Bourne Identity. I've seen all the Bourne films, including Jeremy Renner's somewhat failed experiment. But Bourne Identity is still the one that I will go back and rewatch anytime. I saw this movie when I was probably like 15 or so, and to be honest, I didn't really understand the plot at all. It is somewhat of I'd say it's probably the most complicated action movie on my list.
Sure.
Because it's sort of more of a spy movie-ish, or a bit more of a mystery kind of, as to, this character, Jason Bourne, played by Matt Damon, just kind of wakes up in the ocean with no memory of who he is or what's going on. It slowly kind of unravels where he's been, what he's done, and what he was kind of supposed to do, and how this happened. But the action sequences in Bourne Identity are very, very quick and very kind of, like, it's almost like a martial arts movie.
It has its own pulse, really.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
You really, like, latch on when the action starts. I agree. Yep.
And you just feel this kind of, intensity from Matt Damon that, like, he is pretty much Jason Bourne. He really melded into that character, and Bourne Identity, I think, is the best of the series. So
yeah, I'd agree with that. Well, you had your entry for your comic book movie as Dark Knight. My number 6 is The Punisher with Thomas Jane.
Of course.
And a lot of these films aren't maybe pure form action movies. They're action adventure, sci-fi action. I really feel The Punisher is a very nice bridge between the comic book character and just an action movie, because it really follows the classic action formula in a very satisfying way. The Punisher, motivated by revenge, not necessarily a superhuman by any means.
No,
really.
He's not really a superhero, and it's pretty much a revenge flick, just distilled down pretty perfectly.
Yes, he's just like, I'm really pissed off, I'm motivated, and I'm going to use conventional weapons very effectively and inflict a massive body count against insurmountable odds, seemingly. And it's just a very well-executed, satisfying movie for me.
Yeah.
Always has been.
I think we saw that movie for, like, my 13th birthday. And so 13-year-old kids
a lot
going to see The Punisher.
Yeah, and I'm noticing a lot of the ones that have made my list are from about that time.
I think the early teenage years are really very formidable for action movies.
It's a
and
formative
things like
thing. It's like, that's my action movie.
Yep.
That's what I like.
No,
so.
I agree. Punisher was definitely probably number 13 or 12 for me. So.
Okay. And then I think it's my number 5.
I would say so.
No, yep. Okay, to get the Hong Kong action films into the mix, my number 5 is Hard Boiled.
Okay.
Chow Yun-fat, is that the... Yes.
I did believe his name.
I think
Directed
this movie...
by John Woo.
Yes. John Woo was about to kind of really peak with Western audiences, starting with this movie. Just a few years later, he'd do his first American film, Hard Target, with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Okay.
But Hard Boiled at the time... It's really interesting how Woo just will take all of these like everyday quaint scenes in densely crowded areas in Hong Kong and turn it into a staggering body count massacre
very quickly.
Yes, and each time the main character is just ready with his dual wielding pistols or an Uzi or something, and it's really just something to behold, and at its time, I could feel how this is, it's very frenetic, it's different from the Western action films at this time, but it certainly was influential as far as just the one guy who gets banged up a lot, but he's just always sliding downstairs or jumping to the
very
side.
cinematic.
Strafing with his dual handguns, and I just had a blast viewing it, and I think it's a good middle of the list for me as far as just something that offers something very distinct compared to the other movies on my list.
I'll say that Hard Boiled is not on my list. Because generally, for Asian movies, for me, I generally like it to be more martial artists and things like that. But I will say I have an immense amount of respect for John Woo and what he's done with the action in the action world. And Hard Boiled, especially the hospital sequence towards the end, is probably one of the greatest action sequences ever filmed. So, yeah, Hard Boiled is definitely one to check out. All right, my number 5 is pretty recent. It's the most recent one on my list, and that is John Wick. This movie really kind of came out of nowhere. Keanu Reeves hasn't been a big mainstream action star in quite a while, with some recent flops as well. But John Wick came on the scene with this kind of ridiculous plot about an ex-hitman who's just trying to get by, and suddenly his dog gets murdered, and he's out for revenge. But John Wick, I think, excels as one of the greatest action movies in a long, long time because of, one, Keanu Reeves. I think he plays this kind of guy who starts off, just seeming like, he's lived a long life doing all this shit. He's kind of done with it, and then you just see him slowly starting to unravel in this kind of just quiet fury, Yep. Secondly, the action sequences are near unparalleled with their like, okay, a good example is in a lot of action movies, like an Arnold movie or Stallone movie or something like that, there's just a hail of bullets down screen, and people are falling over the place, they get shot like 8 times or something like that, and maybe they died, maybe they didn't die, you're not really sure. In John Wick, every person he wants to kill, he is dead, for 100% sure. There's just such a precision to how that he kills. Like, that this guy's been doing it his whole life. So the action sequences are very good. And just the kind of whole mythos, I guess, the world portrayed of this kind of underground world of assassins and hitmen and things like that, and hitwomen. It was very fascinating, and one that they're going to be looking, I guess, even more into in the sequel. So, yeah, John Wick came out of complete left field for me, but he definitely blew me away.
Yeah, and that was actually one of my honorable mentions, so I'll just take a quick moment. Yes, John Wick, a very recent film. I just don't think maybe I had quite the initiative to put it on my list, and it might not be groundbreaking in the formula as far as kind of a new mold, but it is just perfectly executed. Yes. It is just a gratuitous maelstrom.
It's very watchable.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, my number 4, I think, is a classic that I can't really see not being on your list. I would be surprised, but that is The Matrix. So when The Matrix came out in 1999, I don't think I saw it till probably 2001, something like that. But yeah, The Matrix definitely borrowed a lot of inspiration from Asian action films, especially something like John Woo and Hard Boiled and things like that. But it was put together in, from an American team with a sci-fi plot, and really it was just something that, we just haven't ever seen before. Especially with these new kind of techniques with the bullet time. Is that
Yep.
okay, I think that's the official term. So there's kind of the slow motion, almost frozen motion, spinning cameras and all these kind of different techniques to really show off the speed of the action, the supernatural kind of speed of the action. And the action sequences in The Matrix, I still just every time I see the hotel lobby shootout or whatever, that is still incredible.
Yep.
It holds up to this day. I mean, if you haven't seen The Matrix at this point, I don't know I don't know why you're watching this list.
Okay, my number 4, First Blood, with good old Sylvester Stallone.
That really surprises me, to be honest, that you would pick First Blood over First Blood Part 2.
Well, I think, Part 2, if I had to pick one up right now and watch it, probably be Part 2. But I like First Blood for its creation of kind of the character of Rambo, for one.
I mean,
And just Rambo himself is he's kind of one of the more interesting action movie characters, because he's capable of, all this action.
He's capable of destroying a country single-handedly.
Right. Yep. He's pretty much like Solid Snake, like
somewhat.
I think, and he goes home to his ranch at the end, and until his some general calls him up, or his country needs him again. And this one, I just kind of is in a similar way that you discussed with The Matrix. So I just really felt an obligation to First Blood, while I may not enjoy it quite as much as First Blood Part 2.
So as an aside then, I'm curious on how you constructed your list, because I constructed mine pure on just watchability. I just looked at these movies, I compared the two, and which one would I rather just sit down and watch?
Yeah.
And so that's why, something like First Blood, which I do like a lot, I couldn't put on my list over some other stuff. But you rank stuff on its importance?
I think a lot of my list is based on watchability, but I feel like, especially with the Rambo series, there's just something about the importance of starting this whole saga of Rambo and that archetype of action that I thought was important to mention. And as far as the construction of my list, I just will mention the one area I did kind of avoid. Was martial arts movies in general. I know this is a little unrelated to First Blood.
Yeah.
But I feel that the pure martial arts movies, like maybe like Enter the Dragon for Bruce Lee, or a lot of some of Jet Li's earlier films, they just kind of have a different ethos, maybe a little different pacing. And when I think of action, I gravitate towards the explosions and the guns,
which there are not much of in First Blood.
No.
Which is why I didn't even contend it for my list. First Blood Part 2 was probably my number 11.
Yeah.
But First Blood Part 1 is a very different movie.
Yeah. Well, you can think of it this way. Since it's Part 2 of First Blood, you can just consider them as a pair.
Yeah. It's just half of the movie.
Yep.
All right.
And then I think it's
your number 3.
My number 3. Okay. We have Die Hard with Bruce Willis.
That's a good movie.
It is, and I have a creeping suspicion this might appear on your list, so I won't try and cover everything.
Could be.
But yeah, Die Hard. It's just from the moment you start watching it, and as you see events unfold, I think you just really attach to Bruce Willis and his character. Like, I think he's definitely one of the more relatable characters.
That would be the word I would use.
Yes, and you can feel his vulnerability as things keep escalating, and he has to just kind of deal with things and wing things as he goes along. He's not just Arnold or Stallone marching into a complex and massacring things.
No.
The narrative really unfolds in a way that is very satisfying as far as okay, what's he gonna do now? You can feel how you can get a sense of how capable all the terrorists are in the movie, and how he really just has to be a bit more innovative than a lot of action stars. I'd say he's not just relying on overwhelming strength or
machine guns
or superior elite military training,
right.
which is I think the part I'll focus on what makes Die Hard such a classic for a multitude of reasons, but. Yeah, Die Hard is just for how spectacular a lot of its moments are. It's really some parts of its believability are really interesting to me.
It still holds up.
Yep. So that's my number 3 for Die Hard.
All right.
Yep.
My number 3 is another somewhat recent movie, and that is Dredd. Now, this is not Judge Dredd starring Stallone. Got to make that distinction. This is Dredd starring Carl Urban, also known as Dredd 3D, which came out a few years ago. And this one I passed by pretty much completely when it came out because of that word 3D at the end of it. I just had no time for that crap. But I finally did watch it a little while later, and man, oh man, was I sorry I waited so long. This is a movie where I literally could finish watching it and then just hit play again. Something about Carl Urban playing this character who is really almost like a force of nature. Like, he's really not relatable whatsoever. He's literally just a force of justice. He never takes off his helmet. You never really see his face. You just see this kind of, this frown, I guess.
Yep.
And there are asses kicked throughout that movie, and with just ruthless judgment. And the budget of this film is not incredible, but I think it is incredible what they accomplished with what they had. With a franchise, I guess, with an intellectual property that really wasn't on many people's radar. I mean, we had Judge Dredd a while back. That didn't do well, and then people kind of forgot about it for the most part. But this came out, and, I don't think you're a big Judge Dredd fan as far as comics or anything like that.
Nope.
I've never really read any of them, but suddenly, boom, I was interested in this, Mega City 1 and Peachtree, all this kind of stuff, this mythos and this lore and stuff, and Dredd, it's so cool. It's so cool and so good and so well done with what they had, so that's my number 3. And my number 2 is, it was the only Arnold movie to make the list. Shocking, but that is Commando, which is the best Arnold movie that he's ever made. It is, it's damn close to a perfect action movie. There are almost no scenes, I would say, that are really wasted or pointless. Right at the start of the movie, pretty much, you get this kind of credit intro where it's somewhat goofy, really. It's silly.
It's very goofy.
With how much he loves his daughter and how they spend their time together out in this,
idyllic, peaceful.
Yeah.
It's just.
And then 3 minutes later, boom, the crisis is there. His daughter's been kidnapped for some reason, and he's got no time for negotiating, no time like that. You know right away what's going to happen. This is just ass-kicking going on constantly for the next hour and a half or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, I would say it is somewhat... There are elements of it all over the place that are somewhat kind of silly and are somewhat comedic, I guess. But it's not a comedy. But the villain is, you can't help but kind of chuckle when you see the villain and, his dialogue and things like that. But... Arnold has never been more badass, and I don't think he'll ever be more badass than in Commando. The body count is spectacular.
Yep.
He pretty much takes out an island full of people single-handedly, and this is just old-school kind of action stuff where he never has to reload, he never gets hit or anything like that, and just the bodies are piling up, one-liners are flying all over the place. It is just pure, 100% grade A Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah. Well said. I agree with that, to be sure.
Yep.
And that's actually my honorable mention, my last one. So I'll just say a few things. It was really tough to wade through my Arnold movies for this list because he is my master of action.
Yeah.
And so
of course,
between True Lies, Commando,
Incredible.
Terminator 2,
Incredible. Made my short list.
Yeah. Right.
Predator made my short list.
Yep. yeah, Commando. It's just it's a lot of fun, and it does it. The funny thing is you can tell it has aged, and like it doesn't matter. Like everything is just so. There's a self-contained world of Arnold who needs to rescue his daughter, and it's just a blast to watch him as an unstoppable force just marching through.
When he's on screen, it's just like, yep,
John Matrix.
Yep. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Okay, and my number 2 is The Matrix, which we've heard a lot about.
Yep.
And I think in a similar way to First Blood, but it is a lot more enjoyable just to go watch right now, is that I feel we don't have so many things in film today, with action movies, with sci-fi movies, with hackers being cool, with all these things without The Matrix.
Yeah.
It really was a definitive movie for its time. And I didn't really know anything about this whole cyberpunk thing at that time.
Not many people.
And I was still pretty young, but this brought cyberpunk to the mainstream, where you can do alternate reality and dystopian future, and this has been done a lot in video games and movies, and you can make it cool and you can make it really accessible for just instant consumption. And you watch this movie. It did create a trilogy. The following films weren't quite as influential or as entertaining to watch, but this was just, for me, just a perfect blend of sci-fi and action. And Keanu Reeves, his kind of stoic, not really evocative acting was just perfect for the tone of that movie, and it's a very pleasant combination and a badass, cool movie. So
I feel like you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that says The Matrix isn't one of the most important action movies.
Yes.
Whether or not they like it or they'll watch it or something like that, but it is absolutely very important.
All right. Well, I did get to before I go to my number 1.
This is usually when you do honorable mentions.
Yes. I did take advantage of you mentioning both of them, so I wanted to give you an opportunity before we got in. This was a very challenging list for me.
It was, yeah.
Yep.
My honorable mentions, I guess I have a couple. One would be probably, the recent Fast and the Furious movies. Mm-hmm. As just a glorious spectacle of just letting your brain go and just enjoying the cinematic glory that you're seeing in front of you. It's almost never realistic, but it's almost always fun. Again, at least with the recent movies, I'll admit I haven't seen all of them. I think I passed on like 2, 3, and 4, but the ones that I have seen, good stuff. And then my other honorable mention is, of course, Terminator 2.
Yes, that's
very tough to cut this from the list. I think I cut it because I just haven't watched it in a while. I think it is kind of lengthy, from what I remember.
Yes.
It's a lengthy movie, and there's plenty of sort of philosophy, I guess, to the movie. It's a kind of a thinking man's action movie, I guess. Mm-hmm. But it is absolutely very important. As far as a sci-fi action movie, it is very good. I should watch it again one of these days. It shows kind of a different side of Arnold than Commando or something like that.
Absolutely.
But it's great. It is great. It was tough to cut it.
My number 1 is Predator.
There you go.
1987, Arnold Schwarzenegger. You assemble a group of badasses. Arnold isn't alone in this movie. I actually can't tell you the name of most of the other squad mates he has. I know Carl Weathers. Yeah, I know Carl Weathers as Dylan.
There's the governor or whatever. What's his name?
Oh.
The wrestler guy. Man, that's a brain fart.
Yep. Anyway, when I first watched this movie, I was young and had no idea what was going to happen with it. And part of the magic of Predator is that it sets out as this action movie, much akin to Commando or to First Blood Part 2 or something like that, where they go into a jungle and they're going to kick some ass.
There is a lot of bravado involved.
And you get to see it unfold at the beginning, and you're liking it. It's
it seems like classic Arnold stuff. There's one-liners, they're wiping out people in forests, jungles and stuff.
And he's got his goons with him, which is a fun addition. Better. And the movie takes this very spectacular turn. Mm-hmm. I almost don't want to ruin it if somehow you haven't seen the movie and don't really associate anything with the title of Predator.
Yeah.
But of course they encounter this alien entity with highly advanced weapons. Technologically speaking, it can really outclass any of them, and it systematically begins hunting them down. And it does it in a way that really brings together the horror and action genres.
There are elements of horror in Predator.
Yes, and for most action movies, you could put them on a spectrum where kind of inconsequential, fun, goofy action you could put maybe on one end with the fast movies.
Yeah.
You get the sense that Arnold, as badass and as in his prime as he is, faces a very deadly threat in Predator.
Yeah.
And he has to almost unmake himself as far as how he always confronted things in his action movies.
That's
in
what
the
I was
80s.
going to say. Is the reason the Predator is great is that around this time, Arnold was like the king of badass action. He was gunning down things. Nothing could stop Arnold. And then Predator comes along, and he basically meets his match. And so, like Arnold, it's almost meta, really.
Yeah, it came at the perfect moment in time in his career.
He has to kind of realize that he can't just brute force this thing out.
Yes.
It will win. And so you see Arnold basically outthinking something, which sounds terrible, but it's so good.
Yes, he has to get very primal and survivalistic, and there's plenty of badass gunplay and explosions, but they reduce it to really this very brutal, very one versus one core. And while it's not the highest production values, or maybe even the best made Arnold film, there's something about it that has just really been very impressionable on me, and I just think it is a classic for a number of different reasons. As you said, with kind of switching up the paradigm a little bit, in a similar way that Die Hard might, where there's really this sense of struggle that elevates it a bit above a lot of other top-notch, top-tier action movies. And amidst a sea of amazing Arnold films, Predator, not Predators. I want to be emphatic here, not Predators. Predator is my top Arnold movie and thus top action film.
Yeah, Predator made my short list,
Yep.
but it would be in contention for number 2 for Arnold with Terminator 2. I'm not sure which exactly one would be. That's for another list, I guess. But finally, my number 1 is Punisher Warzone. No, I'm just kidding. My number 1 is Die Hard. Die Hard was already mentioned from his list. I guess I would say Die Hard is as close to a perfect action film as I think we'll ever get. No scene is flawed, in my opinion. Everything is perfectly paced, perfectly everything. And let me say that a lot of this stuff is somewhat based on nostalgia from when we were like 13, 14, teenage years, when a lot of things are cool and things like that, and so they just kind of stick with you for a while. I saw Die Hard when I was 19. That's when I first saw Die Hard, and it quickly, boom, it was my favorite movie of all time. Done. That says something. But yeah, John McClane as a character is definitely relatable. He's put in this situation, and you can he is not Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's not Stallone. He's not gunning down islands and things like that. He's climbing around in vents because he doesn't want to get shot. And so he's not military. He's a cop, and he's trying to outthink these terrorists. It's almost improvisational, really.
Yeah.
Where
he's winging it as he goes.
Yeah, that's kind of how you feel. Is this character is winging it throughout the whole film, and he's slowly taking out these terrorists. And the lead terrorist, of course, played by Alan Rickman, who's one of the most well-known villains, I think, of all time. And
he was really on his game in this movie.
Yeah,
like you can feel like, oh, John McClane is just barely avoiding the little webs that Alan Rickman's casting, and it's a great interplay between those two when they get to confront each other.
And I mean, you see this action character that is vulnerable, that gets injured, where he's sitting in a bathroom pulling glass out of his feet, and that's not really something you see in many action movies. Even recent stuff like John Wick, he gets injured, but you don't really ever see him kind of falter or anything like that.
Just take more painkillers and more brandy, and
pretty much,
he's good to go.
John McClane, you feel sympathetic for this guy. As much as I love Commando, there's really no sympathy there because Arnold's just gonna kill everybody and get his daughter back.
I think he gets shot and stabbed a few times, and he just goes and
exactly.
and continues on. So
Arnold is kind of this immortal action god. John McClane's somewhat the other end. And so, in my opinion, it's the best action movie of all time. I'm not saying that it won't ever be usurped, but it's going to take quite a bit to take it off.
We'll see how John Wick 2 does with that.
Maybe. All right, so that's our top 10 action movies of all time. Our list differed a little bit, but there was plenty of crossover. We recognize the greats, of course. So let us know what you think, how your list would differ from ours. Let us know for any future top 10 lists. Let us know how Ziggy did as a guest. I'd like to have him on for more stuff. Gives a little bit back and forth, some more discussion, so that's good.
Stuff like The Mummy Returns sneaks in there.
Yeah,
there you go.
I'm not expecting that.
All right.
So, all right, my name is Mangg.
I'm Ziggy.
This has been our top 10 favorite action movies, and we'll see you fine folks around.